So I ultimately decided that I needed to stop and get off the bike and get a drink of water. I had seen a little water fountain at the door to the gym, and I needed to do something because I was in a considerable amount of discomfort. Asthma attacks are very unique things in that they are indescribable. We don't have words in our language for the experience of an asthma attack. And we don't really have words in our language for the experience of suffocation. I mean, yeah, you can have someone grab you by the throat and just squeeze until you pass out, but that's not good for you. And I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily an experience everybody should have, or anybody should have for that matter. But we don't have words for it because usually, if you're getting to that point, the experience is indescribable and there's no one to share that experience with because most people who suffocate to the point of passing out, they don't actually survive all the time. So while several people in this world have experienced suffocation, um, they don't always come back to tell you about it. I remember one person describing to me that they were being taught in some class they took about what an asthma attack feels like, and they were all given a regular sized drinking straw and told to put it in their mouth and told to close their nose shut and then to run. And you could only breathe through the straw. And they said that they ran a little way and they couldn't handle it because it felt too horrible, and so they spit the straw out and cheated and breathed around it because it was just too horrible of a feeling. And I remember looking at them and being like, okay, now imagine that you can't spit the straw out. And that's what it is. It's not the point at which you start to feel the discomfort. It's the point after that when you've been feeling the discomfort for an extended period of time and it's grown to the point of complete agony. You can feel the air against your skin because you need oxygen so badly that even the faint tingle of oxygen against your skin is this burning sensation, and you want it. It's not like pain. Pain is, well, pain is a many flavored thing. And some types of pain are more bearable for people than others. And that sense of comfort with different flavors of pain varies from individual to individual, depending on where your nerves are situated inside your body and just your own personal preferences. Nobody likes the sensation of burning, I think, but mouth pain I've always been able to handle pretty well. Um, with chronic pain, you have points at which you can distract yourself from the pain. It tends to come in waves because, you know, that's just how it seems to happen. At least that's the way I've always experienced it. It comes in waves, and you kind of, if you've been dealing with a lot of pain for a while, you kind of learn how to ride the smooth part of the wave through the bad part of the wave and then kind of hop onto the next. So if the pain is at its worst at the crest, you kind of hide at the bottoms of the waves, and then the next crest comes, and then you hide in the bottom of the waves, and you just kind of keep your consciousness in the least painful part of the pain, and the pain comes and goes in these just waves that hit you. Suffocation does not feel like that. It's just this immediate blaring red klaxon inside your head, because suffocation absolutely and very quickly will kill you. And so it is an alarm bell ringing as loud as it can ring to let you know that something has gone terribly wrong, and if you do not rectify it immediately, bad things will happen to you. And if you're having an asthma attack, this can go on for hours or even days. And yes, I know what it feels like when it goes on for days. It's interesting. I'll tell you about that one too, I guess. But going back to this thing that happened when I was 17, I walked over to the water at the tank and I got some water. They had those little triangle paper cups. And the first time I did it, I remember, I wasn't feeling good. Like I was pretty woozy. The room was starting to spin a little bit. I was not feeling good at all. But, I got to the water. I drank the water. I walked back. I got back on the exercise cycle and I started going again. I built up the momentum to where I had been before. I got to about that speed that I was aiming for in order to complete the assignment on time. And I started going. And I think it was about 5 minutes later, I can't really remember too clearly, that I needed another drink of water because things were steadily getting worse and worse and worse. So I stopped the extra cycle and I lost all that lovely momentum I built up, and I went and I got some water. And this time I was very weak and I collapsed on my knees in front of the water dispenser, and so I'm on my knees reaching up and pouring the water into the little triangle paper cup, and I happened to glance over and my gym teacher was straightening up the weight room, and there was a man in a suit standing next to him, and I have no idea who that man was. But I was quite certain that I heard my gym teacher and the man in the suit, that he was looking at me, the man in the suit was, and I'm quite certain I heard my gym teacher saying, "These kids will do anything to get out of doing work." I swear I heard him say that. And it didn't matter. I threw my paper cup in the garbage and I got up and I stumbled back to the exercise machine and I got back on and I kept going. It wasn't long after I got back onto the exercise machine at this time that I realized that I was dying, um, which is an unusual thing. Like, I think a lot of people think they're dying sometimes. They freak out. And it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And it's like, I remember in the ambulance one time we picked up a girl who was having a panic attack, and she said she was having a heart attack, and it was very obvious she was having a panic attack. And the whole time we were taking her to her hospital, it was like, look, just breathe. We're almost there. We're almost there. You're not supposed to tell patients in an ambulance kind of situation, you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. That was the one ambulance ride where I sat there just, it's okay. You're going to be okay. It's okay. We're almost there. You're going to be okay. If someone's leg is badly mangled by a piece of farming equipment and it's a bloody mess and they're possibly hemorrhaging, you don't necessarily want to tell them it's going to be okay, because nothing about that situation is okay. But this gal, she thought she was having a heart attack. Her heart was fine. She was just really panicking and hyperventilating, and she was telling us all sorts of things about her situation that were classic panic attack kinds of symptoms. And so it was like, look, we're almost there. It's going to be okay. You need to calm down. Which is really funny. I think a lot of people have mistaken, like a lot of people I talked to back in my hometown mistook panic attacks and asthma attacks. Like, they had this idea they were the same thing. Going back to my mechanical example of how an asthma attack works, that's not how a panic attack works. A panic attack, it's adrenaline. You kind of have your fight or flight response tripped. Something spooks you, kind of like a spooked horse, I guess, and you immediately go into the fight or flight response. And that's lots of adrenaline through your system. You start breathing really, really fast so that you can fight or run for your life because some sort of danger has come upon you. And, this is all important and good, but if you're just having a fight or flight response because you're thinking about how scary that math test that you're going to have to face is, that's not necessarily the most helpful reaction to be having. And also, you don't necessarily know why you're having that reaction. Like, you might be really stressed out about that math test, but you don't necessarily know why all of a sudden it's really hard to breathe and you feel like you have to breathe a lot. If you've been running and you feel like you have to breathe a lot and, it feels kind of hard to breathe, it makes perfect sense because you've been running. Like, if you're a normal person who runs like a normal person without, keeling over and dying the way I seem to want to, that makes sense and everything makes sense about it. But if you're sitting there thinking about your math test and suddenly you feel like you've been running a mile, or at least your lungs feel like you've been running a mile, that's scary. You're already spooked and now something spooky is happening to you. It just revs everything up more. And so panic attacks kind of tend to spiral out of control very easily. I don't think I've ever experienced a panic attack. I've had anxiety attacks, but they're not the same thing, I don't think. A panic attack, you start hyperventilating, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I can't breathe. Oh my God, why can't I breathe? Oh my God, what's going on? I can't breathe. This is bad. Oh my God, I'm going to die because I can't breathe. Oh my God, I'm going to die because I can't breathe and this is bad. And, sometimes your heart is pounding really, really fast, which is why that girl that we picked up in the ambulance said she was having a heart attack. She was panicking. And because she was panicking, she was envisioning these worst case scenarios for these symptoms that she had that were very inexplicable to her. And, it was not fun for her at all, but it was adrenaline. It was just lots of adrenaline and lots of panic and lots of fear in this fight or flight response. If she calmed down, which I know that's, if you're one of those people who's prone to panic attacks, I know that seems like almost impossible. I mean, even if you know how they work, it's still almost impossible when you're in the middle of it. If you just calm down, the symptoms start to subside. In my situation, on that exercise cycle, I was completely without emotion. I was extremely calm. And I realized in an extremely calm way, I am going to die. And it was this very removed, calm kind of situation for me because I'd done this a million times. I'd had so many asthma attacks in gym class. I'd had so many bad attacks. It was so familiar. It was so routine that I just looked at it and I was like, okay, I think this is the big one. This isn't just a bad attack. This is the big one. Okay, so what do I do now? What do you do when the big one finally comes? And the obvious answer to that is, if I want to survive, I need to stop cycling on this exercise cycle. As I'm cycling away on this exercise cycle, I need to stop. If I want to have any hope of surviving this, I need to stop now. And I'm cycling away. I need to stop if I plan to work, if I plan to get any kind of, regain any kind of control over my lungs, because they're definitely not functioning the way they should be. I can't remember where the air was going. The way I always felt an asthma attack is how deep the air goes when you breathe in. Right now, that feels like it's going almost all the way down to my, it's going like, I'd say maybe 3 or 4 inches past my belly button, all the way down. It's a wonderful feeling. It's so nice to be able to breathe. Like, you guys have no idea how good this feels. Just everybody take a deep breath and savor the air for a second. But yeah, right now it's going, say, 3 inches past my belly button. That's what I'm feeling. Now, just because you have the physical sensation that your lungs are going down that far, that doesn't mean that that's how far down your lungs are going. That's just how you feel it. My mom taught voice lessons, and she said that she was teaching people to breathe all the way down to their crotch. And that was a good way to imagine it. You're trying to breathe very, very deeply when you're singing. You're trying to expand your lungs as far as you can so that you can have plenty of air to produce sound with. So there was a reason she was explaining that they had to breathe all the way down. That's how you feel it. When I was having these attacks, I could feel, let me get back here a little bit. I could feel the various levels to which the air was descending in my lungs. I'm trying to remember exactly what level the air felt like it was going down to at that point. And I think that it was going down to, let's see, right about here. Right about here. This was how deep I could breathe. Normally I can go a few inches below my belly button, all the way down there. At that point, this is where the air stopped. I could breathe that far and no more. I was dizzy. I was confused. I was obviously not thinking too clearly. I was experiencing the effects of oxygen deprivation. You can look those up. They're kind of interesting to read. They're very familiar to me. And so I was trying to figure out whether or not I should stop cycling on the exercise cycle. As I was cycling on the exercise cycle, and my symptoms were steadily getting worse. And I sat there for, I think it was a solid 4 minutes. It might have been 5 minutes. I'm pretty sure it was 4. 4 is the number I'm remembering. Because I got all the way up to the 20-minute mark, and exactly the 20-minute mark I gave up. But until, which is why I'm alive to talk to you about this right now. But until then, I had this huge internal debate going on. Do I stop cycling? If I do, I'm going to have to explain myself to the gym teacher. Well, that sounds exhausting. I don't know if I have the energy to do that. Also, I don't want to deal with the gym teacher scolding me. I don't feel up to it. I'd rather die. Which is really funny, but it's also really true. At the time, I was thinking about it in the very literal sense, which is, people always do the I'd rather die than, have to do this, have to do that, some mundane task. At that point in my life, I literally would have rather died than deal with my gym teacher scolding me over refusing to do what he had told me to do. There was also a very extreme shame element going on there because, of course, this was supposed to be something I was supposed to control. I hadn't maintained my clarity of focus, my willpower. I hadn't quite exercised that mental control over my body's reactions to stimuli. And so, this whole asthma attack that I was suffering from right now was really my fault. Yes, that was how I used to think. Yes, that's incredibly messed up thinking. I was an incredibly messed up person. By the time I reached 17 years of age, oops, let me get that. By the time I reached 17 years of age, this is insane person thinking. Nobody sane goes through this kind of thought process. I remember being 12 years old and reading a book about, or reading an article on the history of Germany, honestly, the Nazis and the whole we were just following orders excuse that was used at the Nuremberg trials. And I remember looking at it and thinking, okay, so it's not just me. Adults go through this too. People who are in charge tell you to do horrible things, and you go and do them, even though you know they're horrible. Okay, I feel so much better about this now. That that is not a healthy thought. Normal people don't have that kind of response when they read about the Nuremberg trials. Like, no, no, that's not healthy. I realize that's not healthy, and I think I realized it even then, but at the same time, it was all. There were a lot of things in my head that were very confused. You don't go through extreme mental gymnastics for years and years and years on end without being a little confused. So, yeah, I was not sure that it was worth it to stop exercising on the exercycle just to save my life if it meant dealing with the shame of knowing that I had failed completely and utterly. I had failed so badly that I had to actually stop doing the exercise I had been told to do. And that had never really happened to me before that point. I was always able to soldier through it up until that point, no matter how miserable it was, no matter how physically agonizing it was. I had never actually had to stop. Sometimes I had to take breaks and the teachers would tell me, come on, keep going. Why are you stopping? And, they'd scold me for that, but it was never one of those things where I just flat out refused to do something, and now I was contemplating flat out refusing to do something. And that was a big deal for me. When I was a very small child, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, those years, I was in this elementary school, and we would do gym class outside whenever the weather was nice enough. And there was the gym area, the little baseball diamond where they had us exercising and doing all our class stuff. And then there was the playground that we would play in for school. And then beyond that, there was this little copse of trees. And I remember so many times going to gym class and having an asthma attack in the warm-up round where you're, running laps, because that's what every single gym teacher always made us do to warm up our muscles for gym class. And it was torture. I remember I'd be standing there and I'd be kind of wavering a little bit, not feeling very well, and everything was blurry and foggy and confused and muddled and hazy, and I'd be staring at that copse of trees and thinking to myself, I might be able to make it all the way across this baseball diamond, all the way across the playground, and if I can just make it to the trees, they won't find me, and I'll be able to get away, and maybe I'll be okay then. My house was 2.25 miles from the school, and so I knew it was a long walk. I knew it was a lengthy hike, and I knew that I could make that hike too. It was all down a highway in the middle of a wheat field, but I figured if I hid in the wheat fields, maybe nobody would find me until I got to the house. And I looked at it, was like, I think I can make it. And I remember so many times in gym class, like I really don't remember my gym classes much at all, except for the fact that I was in misery, like physical misery. But I remember looking out at that copse of trees and thinking, I can make it. I can make it. I can do it. I really think I can make it. The gym teacher's distracted with the other students. He put me at the far end of the baseball diamond today. I can do it. If I just run for it right now, right in the middle of when everybody's playing, they're not going to see me going. If I just run, I might be able to make it. And I never did, because I knew that if I actually succeeded, best case scenario, I managed to get all the way home and nobody caught me. My parents would take me and send me right back to the school again. I wasn't getting away from shit. And so as the years went by, I began to develop this sense of warped dignity. I didn't perceive myself as a human being. Like, that went away very quickly, my sense of humanity. I perceived myself as an animal, because you wouldn't do to a human being the things that were allowed to happen to me. So I was an animal, and the world made sense, and that was all I cared about. Like, you can do a lot of weird mental gymnastics as long as the world makes some sort of sense. And that's what I was doing. I was making sense of the world. I was not a human being. I didn't have the rights or entitlements that human beings had, because I was just an animal. I was some sort of lesser thing. I was a thing instead of a person. And everything made sense, but I had some sense of dignity left. Obviously my grades were horrible, because you can't really ace a math test when you can't think clearly. It's kind of just a thing that happens, I guess. And, of course the attacks, they linger. So just because I had an attack in gym class, and just because I walked out of gym class, that doesn't mean that everything was over. It lingered for a while afterwards, and depending on the severity of the attack, it could last all day long. The initial symptoms would die down pretty quickly, but the lingering oxygen deprivation, the lingering swelling, the lingering, it stays. It just stays, and it's awful. But my sense of dignity at that point was kind of built around the fact that at least I was able to complete the tasks that were assigned to me. In this gym class that I was in, whichever one I was in at the time. I couldn't do it as fast as the other kids. I couldn't do as well as the other kids. Yeah, all my report cards had D's on them, or sometimes even F's. But you know what? At least I did the task. Even if it was slower than everybody else and more poorly executed than everybody else, even if I was the worst kid in class, at least I did the damn thing. Which it took every bit of strength I had to do. But at least I did that. Well, there I was at 17, approaching the 20-minute mark on this stupid exercise cycle, and thinking, do I really want to give up that last little shred of dignity that I have left in me? And I knew I was being ridiculously stupid, but I mean, what was I saving by saving my life at that point? I mean, I didn't have any of this. This that I'm living in, this paradise that I call my life right now, with a husband who loves me and beautiful children who are healthy and happy and growing, all this wonderful stuff that I've got right now, I didn't have any of this shit. And so, sitting there at 17 on my way to on my way to hell, I didn't understand why I should take any kind of action to preserve my life, when I could just as easily sit on the exercise cycle and continue exercising until I fell right off of it and died. Like, why not? What was I preserving here? I wasn't a human being. I was a thing. I was just an animal. I had no inherent worth or value. Who would save something like that? And why the hell should I save something like that? And I can't remember what finally made me decide to get off the stupid exercise cycle, but at exactly the 20-minute mark, I finally decided it was time to stop. It took me about 4 minutes of deliberation and thinking and pondering and considering, and even with all the desperation of the asthma attack and the agony of the oxygen deprivation, it still took me way longer than it would take any sane or rational person. But eventually I did stop. I stopped the exercise cycle, and once the momentum was gone, it was like, I don't have the strength to build that momentum back up again. I'm not getting back on this thing. I'm committed. So I got off the exercycle and I went to pick up my backpack. I reached down, I grabbed my backpack with my hand, I went to sling it over my shoulder, and my fingers were so weak that they just slipped right off the backpack like I hadn't even touched it. So I looked at the backpack for a second, and then I reached down again and I got a firmer grip on it and I slung it over my shoulder and I started walking out. And by this point, I think it was by the second point that I got water that people were starting to ask if I was okay because I looked quite horrible. And so people are like, "Are you okay? Is everything all right? Are you okay?" And I was just kind of stumbling around, kind of like a zombie. I didn't really acknowledge them or say anything. It was just kind of like, ugh. I couldn't talk, and that's another funny thing about asthma attacks, but I'll get into that later. As I was walking out the gym toward the stairs that go up to the rest of the school, the ground level, because the gym was in the basement, I heard the gym teacher yelling at me, "Where are you going? Hey!" And I yelled back at him, "I'm leaving before I die," and then I just kept on walking. It wasn't an emotional statement, it was just a very blunt statement of facts because I didn't have the energy to put any kind of emotion or sarcasm into anything. I didn't have the I didn't have the capacity to think in terms of sarcasm at that point. I was barely thinking clearly at all. In fact, like with a severe asthma attack, the only thing you really think about is breathing. It takes every bit of concentration and every bit of strength you have to just think, breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. That's what I was thinking. That was pretty much all I was thinking. Anything else, it was like little scratchy blips on a screen. It wasn't a lot of information going through, and most of it was just breathe in, breathe out. If you don't maintain that level of concentration, you're not going to breathe. So he's yelling at me from behind, and I figure, okay, at some point I'm going to have to stop so this guy can start scolding me because that's going to happen no matter what. And I saw the stairs, and I figured, well, when you're at a slight incline, like when you're leaning back at an incline, it's more comfortable than lying down flat. That's something that they actually teach you when you're in EMT training, which I did. If you have someone who's having breathing difficulty, you need to kind of prop them up at about this angle-ish. Yeah, something like that. So that they can breathe more easily because gravity is assisting them as they breathe. If they lie down flat, suddenly gravity isn't really working with them so well. So I lay down on the stairs. I don't know if I really knew about the incline thing. I can't remember where I really learned that. I think it might have been I was hospitalized at one point. I think they told me then. Or it could just be experience with, I feel comfortable in this position. I feel very uncomfortable in this position. I'm going to go with this position instead. I don't remember how I learned it. I just knew that I knew it. And so I lay down on the stairs. Gym teacher comes out and sees me lying down on the stairs. He starts scolding me. I don't actually remember a word he said. I remember lying on the stairs. My head was on one of the steps. My eyes kind of rolled over this way, and there was a little piece of gum on the stairs that someone had dropped right over there. There were these concrete steps, and someone had dropped a light, like a sky blue piece of gum. It was all chewed up. It was kind of longish, like, chewed up gum has different shapes. I remember the shape. It was kind of a longish, like you could see all the little tooth marks, and it kind of squished out around the tooth marks at the end, so it was kind of bulbous in the end. Kind of like a dog bone. It was lying there, kind of right about here-ish, and I remember my eyes just kind of rolled over in that direction. They spotted the gum, and the gum was easy for my eyes to fix on, so my eyes fixed on the gum. And I'm lying there just kind of staring at the gum and not moving, and all I'm thinking is breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And I could hear my gym teacher's voice as he was yelling at me and scolding me, because that's really all any of these guys knew how to do. Like, I know there are good gym teachers in the world, and my kids love the gym teacher at their school, and so I'm happy. But the gym teachers at my school, I mean, I had one good gym the swimming coach. The swimming gym teacher was awesome because I got along with her because she wasn't always scolding me for screwing up all the time because I wasn't having asthma attacks every day when I was in her class. So we got along swell, but but everybody else, it wasn't quite so nice. He was yelling at me, and I remember it was just weird because I heard the noise of his voice, but my brain wasn't really interpreting any of those noises as words because I didn't have the energy to do that. And so it was just loud background noises, like loud human voice shouting. It was all blurred out. There were no words. It was just noise. And all I remember was thinking, breathe in, breathe out. I was in extreme discomfort, and that was all I was aware of. That was all I had the mental capacity to be aware of at that point. So he yells at me, and at some point he says, "Are you okay?" And I kind of looked away from the gum in his direction, which wasn't particularly easy because I had to turn my head a little bit on the step and kind of look at him, kind of, because he was just sort of standing over me and yelling. And I nodded once, and he turned around, he walked away, and he just left me there on the staircase. And so I'm lying on this staircase, like having an extremely severe asthma attack. This was definitely call 911 kind of territory. And I'm lying there, and I'm thinking to myself, breathe in, breathe out. So that was when I started hearing voices. It wasn't like hearing voices, like kind of schizophrenia hearing voices, where you're hearing voices from the outside. I knew they were inside my head, but things were a little confusing at that point in time. So I'm hearing these voices screaming at me, one voice in particular, and I knew it was my own voice, but it wasn't exactly me because me was too busy concentrating on the breathing in and the breathing out. So this voice is like screaming at me, just very, very angry, get up, you bitch, get up, get out of this place. You need to get up, you need to get out of here. And I mean, I was stupid, so I did that. The safest thing I could have done was probably just continue lying in the staircase because any movement was using up oxygen. Like, the way I figure it, and I don't know how accurate this is because I haven't read up on it in a really long time because I haven't had an asthma attack in over a decade. I haven't had an asthma attack in over a decade, so none of this seems really particularly important in my day-to-day life. But as you move around while you're having an asthma attack, actually as you move around in life, like anytime you're moving your muscles, you're using up oxygen. So this is using up oxygen. My legs, huge muscles in my legs, because that's some of the biggest muscles in my body. Those are definitely using up oxygen. Walking uses up oxygen. Lifting weights uses up oxygen. That's why I always tell you to like breathe when you're exercising. You're using up oxygen. I should have just laid there in the stairway because any movement at all was using up valuable oxygen that I didn't actually have to spend. I had enough to keep my brain running and my diaphragm moving. The diaphragm was critical. That was the only muscle, well, the heart, obviously, but the diaphragm was really the only voluntary muscle that I had that needed to be controlled in any way. Breathe in, breathe out. But this voice in my head was screaming at me that I needed to get up and I needed to get out of there, so I very stupidly decided to get up and I started crawling my way out of the staircase. I got up to the lunchroom, which was above the gym, and I started walking across the lunchroom to my locker. I got about halfway through the lunchroom, 3/4 of the way, and I needed to stop for air. Like, I had to stop. Now, as I'm walking across the lunchroom, up until that point, I was stomping my feet and coughing every time I took a step because my hope was that I could somehow break the plugs of mucus that were obstructing my airways very completely. Like, the air was, again, it was only about to this area. Air's only going down to about here. Breathe in. Okay, stop. Can't go any further. Breathe out. Breathe in. Yep, can't get any more than that. Breathe out. Not so good. Not so good. So I was trying to break open the obstruction in my airways by coughing, which would hopefully break those plugs in my air. This is the way I understood it then. I don't know if this is accurate, but your alveoli, of course, they transfer oxygen and carbon dioxide with your, bloodstream. So if a branch or several alveoli have been blocked off entirely by the constriction in your airways and by, any mucus that's plugging that up completely, all you're going to get is a continued buildup of carbon dioxide. Every little bit of oxygen is going to be seized out of that alveoli and filled up and replaced with carbon dioxide. This is how I understood it. I don't know how accurate that is. So I had these little bubbles in my lungs full of carbon dioxide that were doing absolutely nothing for me because they were completely sealed off. And my goal was to cough as hard as I could and push with my diaphragm as hard as I could, as abruptly as I could, to break that seal and just blow as much air out of my lungs as possible so that when I breathed back in, I could create enough of a vacuum to breathe in fresh, clean air. And so I would stomp my foot to try and break up that bubble as much as possible, and then also cough as hard as I could simultaneously, trying to just break it up, just to get a little bit more air in. I probably looked quite ridiculous, but I was too far gone to care. So I'm stomping my feet and coughing as hard as I can, which was pretty weak. It's not a full throated cough. It was a little. Okay, try that again. Let's see. Breathe in, breathe out. It was not a full throated cough. But I was trying because, I mean, what else could I do? I had to try. I stopped for air at the 3/4 mark in the lunchroom. I screamed at myself a bunch that I needed to keep going, and I started down the hallway toward the locker bay. I got pretty far down that hallway, and then I decided that I needed to stop for air again. So I went to lean against the wall, and my entire body just gave out on me. I collapsed on the floor. I lost all control of my diaphragm muscle. It went over from the voluntary state to the involuntary, like a little switch flipping, actually. It was really kind of weird. The involuntary diaphragm me started hyperventilating because I was suffocating, and it knew it. And involuntary me is not necessarily as bright as voluntary me. Although I was pretty dumb too. I was 17, what can I say? I was brainwashed and 17. That's a bad combo. But yeah, my diaphragm was fluttering. It was just trying to breathe as fast as it could. And what was happening is I'd breathe and the air would go down as far as it could. It would hit those swollen, irritated parts of my lungs. It would immediately feel that irritation and I would start to cough and hack. And, that wasn't any good. So I was just coughing, hacking, and hyperventilating. And anytime I met any kind of resistance, which makes sense. The involuntary muscle it makes sense that it would do that. When you're not thinking about breathing, you're probably just breathing like that. You breathe until you get a little bit of resistance. That means your lungs are full. Then you breathe back out again. It's very easy and relaxed. Just like that. Easy, easy. The little tiny bit of resistance that you encounter tells your diaphragm muscle, your involuntarily operating diaphragm muscle, this means your lungs are full. Go ahead and breathe out again. At that point, there was nothing but blockage and resistance inside my lungs. So any little bit of resistance, my diaphragm was not actually getting any air into my lungs at all. Which means to say, like, I mean this in the most literal sense, I wasn't actually breathing at that point. I had stopped breathing. Yes, there was air going in and out of my mouth, but it stopped at about this point because once it hit the lungs, everything was sealed off. There was just nothing but blockage in there. And so I was breathing like this. And the air was going down to about here. And that was it. I kind of squirmed around on the ground until I got into a slightly more comfortable kind of sitting position. I used my backpack to kind of create that angle on the wall. And I lay there, breathing like this. I don't know if the microphone's actually going to pick up that sound now that I think of it. And I knew I was dying at that point. Like, I mean, I knew I was dying before that point, but now I was really dying because the point at which you stop breathing, that's usually a pretty sure sign you're going to die. So I was lying there and I was dying. And it was like, well, this is basically back where we were on the exercycle, only now you have the shame of all of this mess. Getting scolded by the teacher, you could have skipped out on that and just died on the exercycle. This seems like extra steps. So I looked at it, it was like, okay, well, the good news is, the really, really good news with all this is I'm going to be dead in approximately 4 minutes. Because I think that's how long it takes to suffocate to death with no oxygen. There were variables going on with that I didn't know. Apparently it takes more like 6 minutes, but I was already severely oxygen deprived, so I don't know how many minutes I actually had to work with. At the time, my estimate was 4 minutes. The great thing about all that was the fact that I had only about 4 minutes left of physical suffering to go through. I was in incredible agony. indescribable agony, because we really don't have words in our language for the kind of discomfort that I was experiencing. And I only had 4 more minutes, and that was it. I was going to die. I was going to get out of here. I was never going to have to suffer through any of this shit again. That was pretty okay with me. Like, I was ready to go. Like, it wasn't suicide. I hadn't intentionally got myself into this situation. I mean, I had, but I was just obeying what I was told to do. Ever since I was a little kid, you do what you're told. Is it horrible? Yes. Are you going to suffer? Yes. You do it anyway. Okay. And so there I was. I wasn't trying to kill myself. Here I was dying, and it was like, okay, cool. Maybe this is it. My husband just interrupted to let me know that it is getting very late, and he needs to go to bed. And so, until we get a designated studio, I'm probably going to have to wrap this up a lot quicker than I meant to, which means that we're right at the dramatic point where it's like, yep, I was totally dying. And we're going to summarize that very briefly with but I survived, so that's cool. I did survive. I probably should make another video talking about that. I want to go into depth more about how, with all that messed up stuff in my background, because I mean, this seems like I think this is a reasonable description. I've been really trying very hard to be as accurate as possible with this, because a lot of people didn't believe me. A lot of people thought that I was making it up. A lot of people thought that the asthma wasn't real. A lot of people thought I was just trying to get attention. So I've been trying very hard to be as accurate as possible and as clear as possible in my description. I don't want to make anything sound worse than it actually was, and at the same time, I want to give you an idea of the full scope of what it was. You know, I got to the point where I nearly died, and I was in the process of dying, and I didn't even care all that much anymore, because that was what my life was all pretty much about. Like, I was always doing badly in school because I was always sick, and I was always sick because I was always going through these kinds of experiences. And there were lulls in that. There were periods of time where I got out of that pattern. I managed to take a few swimming classes, and things got better for me physically, at least, but I was still seriously messed up in the head. Like, you just don't go through all that and end up not being messed up in the head. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but we are really out of time for tonight. So I think I'll just leave you on that cliffhanger. I realized I was dying. I had 4 minutes left to live. And I'll finish it up from there. Just talking about how I became a dancer, and how becoming a dancer was in so many ways a healing experience for me that enabled me to overcome a lot of these experiences, because I didn't exactly have access to therapy, shall we say. It wasn't like I could go, into some expensive therapist and say, hey, look, these are the shattered pieces of my brain. Could you just help me sweep them up and put my mind back together? That didn't happen for me. So I had to kind of figure out my own way to fix myself, which is not ideal, and I would never recommend that other people try to fix themselves. But not having any other options, I had to kind of fix myself. So I want to share that with you. I want to tell you guys about how I survived, because it's always been kind of weird and trippy, and even to this day, I don't know how many people survive what I went through with that. And so that's one of the reasons I'm kind of telling this story. Like, I seriously I'm hoping that I'll hear from somebody who's been through this kind of thing before, or knows people who've been through this kind of thing before, and can tell me, like, is this normal? Like, obviously it's not normal, but how many people survive what I went through? Because that's just always been a mystery to me. And I've always been curious about that. Like, I tried looking at research in it, and the research that I found was very, not particularly helpful. It was usually people in ICUs who had various other complications, but they also had immediate access to medical care, and there was no access to medical care where I was. I was alone in a hallway. So yeah, I'm gonna call that it for tonight. This is part 1. I'll start up part 2 as soon as possible, perhaps tomorrow-ish or sometime this weekend-ish. I don't want to put it off too long, and then we'll get back to our normal schedule of videos, which is not going to be all about me and my messed up childhood. Um, but I did want to kind of, I am going to tie this all together kind of for you guys and try to explain just how I became, who I am, which is not always your average, normal, functional kind of woman. So thank you all for listening. Those of you who have listened, I don't know if this is this is obviously not my normal channel video. So, if you've taken the time to listen, thank you. And I will post a follow up to this video as soon as possible. I'll talk to you guys later.